I find the waterfall by accident because I am trying to stop walking on open snow. The road is a bad idea. The tree line is a bad idea. Everything that looks easy is where people have already gone, and where the infected already drift. I stay in the ugly spots. Dry washes, rocky cuts, deadfall tangles where footprints break up. I keep moving because stopping in the wrong place turns into a slow trap. I do not have a truck. I do not have a group. I have a pack that used to feel heavy and now feels light in the way that scares me. The cold keeps the world quiet in a fake way. Snow eats sound, but it also records it. Every step is a signature. Every bend in the trail is a chance to see someone else's signature crossing mine. I am watching for tracks the way I used to watch for traffic when I crossed streets. I am not looking for good news. I am looking for warnings. The waterfall announces itself before I see it. Not a roar because everything is frozen and the flow is choked down, but a steady grind and hiss underneath the wind. I follow it from a distance, staying on stone when I can, stepping over crusted snow in places where my boot prints will look broken and old. The sound gives cover. It also steals information. I cannot hear much besides it. When I finally get a clean view, I stop behind a stand of thin pines and just stare. The falls drop out of a narrow notch in the rock. Ice has taken over almost everything. A thick curtain of it hangs down, milky in places, clear in others, with trapped air bubbles and dirty streaks where wind has pasted grit. The bottom has a mound of frozen spray built up into a slick ramp. The actual water is still moving somewhere behind the ice, a dark line that I can barely catch, and the whole thing looks solid from a distance. I do not walk straight to it. I circle wide. I look for signs of people, fire scars on rock, trash, cut branches, boot prints that do not belong to me. The only tracks I see are old deer lines and a few bird hop marks. I see one set of human footprints, but they are faint and drifting under new powder, and they cut across the wash and never go near the ice. That tells me something. Someone saw it and did not want it, or someone did not notice what I notice. What I notice is the space behind it. The rock face curves inward behind the curtain. Not much, but enough. Waterfalls carve a hollow over time. Even frozen, it keeps that shape. If there is a pocket behind that ice, it could hide light. It could hide smoke in the way that matters, spreading it thin into cold air and noise. It could hide a person from anyone scanning the canyon. It could also kill a person by collapsing. I take a knee and set my pack down slow. I pull out my small binoculars, cheap ones from a gas station rack, and I study the edges of the ice. I look for cracks that run deep. I look for places where the ice has pulled away from rock. I look for a gap at the side where I could slip behind without breaking the whole sheet. I do not see anything obvious. That is not comfort. That is uncertainty. I back off and eat without cooking. A crushed granola bar that tastes like paper and sugar. I sip water, careful, because refilling is not simple. Every time I open the bottle, I smell my own breath in the plastic. It makes me think of small spaces and stale air. I keep looking while I chew. The wind shifts. The sound of the falls changes slightly, a higher pitch, and a small chunk of ice breaks free from somewhere in the curtain and drops. It hits the frozen mound at the bottom and shatters into pieces that skip and slide. The noise is sharp. It makes my shoulders tighten and my hands pause on the zipper of my pack. Nothing answers. No birds erupt. No distant shout. No sudden movement down the wash. I decide that if I am going to do something dumb, I need to do it with a plan. I move closer, but not straight in. I approach from the side where the rock wall gives me cover. My boots scrape stone more than snow. I step slow, placing my weight, because a slip here means a broken ankle, and that ends the story in a way I do not want. I keep my head turning. I keep checking up canyon and down canyon. The infected do not move with purpose, but noise pulls them. Also, people pull them, even when people are trying not to. At the base of the ice mound, the cold air is different. It has that dense, wet edge that freezes your eyelashes if you stay too long. The ice curtain is close enough now that I can see the layers. It is thick, several inches at least, maybe more in the center. The outer surface is rough, with frozen ripples. The inside looks smoother, with trapped lines that mark different freeze events. I find the first possible entry on the right side, where the ice meets rock. There is a narrow seam, dark, maybe an inch wide in the deepest point. It runs upward a couple of feet and then disappears under a thicker section. I crouch and angle my head. Cold air leaks out of it. Not much. A slow breath of chill that smells like rock and old water. I do not put my fingers in. I use the handle of my knife. I touch the edge of the seam and press. The ice does not flex. The sound of my touch gets swallowed by the constant hiss behind it. I pull back and think about tools. I have a small hatchet. I have a folding camp shovel. I have a cheap pry bar I stole from a construction site weeks ago. I have 2 tarps, one blue and one gray, both with holes and duct tape repairs. I have paracord. I have a lighter. I have a metal cup, a small pot, and a thin sleeping bag that is not meant for this. I have a foam pad with a corner torn off. I have food that will not last 60 days unless I get more. I stand there in the spray zone, looking at the ice curtain, and my mind does math without numbers. It runs scenarios. If I carve a pocket, I need to avoid heating the ice. I need airflow. I need a way to get in and out without leaving a bright trail of prints. I need to haul water without making a path that points to my hiding spot. The idea is stupid, and it is also the first thing that feels better than walking until I collapse. I start by choosing where to work. I do not touch the center of the ice curtain. I pick the side seam where rock gives support. If the ice shifts, I want it to shift onto rock, not onto empty air above me. I clear the immediate area of loose chunks, pushing them aside with my boot. I move them down the wash, spreading them out so it does not look like a work site. I keep stopping to listen, even though the falls make listening hard. It is habit more than function. I pull the small shovel and scrape away powder at the seam. Under the powder is hard ice. I take the pry bar and work it into the seam. It does not go far. I tap it with the hatchet, not hard. I do not want a ringing sound. I want dull pressure. The bar bites in a little, and when I lever it, a thin crack runs upward, a hairline. It makes my hands freeze in place for a second. I wait. Nothing falls. The crack stays. I keep going, slow, a few millimeters at a time, working the pry bar, then pulling it out, then working again. I am not trying to break the ice. I am trying to open space. The cold keeps the ice brittle. That helps. It also means it can fracture in ugly ways if I get greedy. After 10 minutes, I have a gap wide enough to slide my fingers into. I do it carefully, glove off, skin exposed for only a moment. The air behind is colder than the air outside. The space exists. I feel rock behind it, wet and smooth. I switch to the hatchet and chip at the edge of the seam, shaving away thin layers. Chips fall and clatter, but the falls swallow most of it. I push the chips away. I keep my shoulders angled, ready to pull back. My eyes flick up every few seconds to watch the curtain above. I create a slot big enough for my head to fit through. I do not go in yet. I hold the hatchet still and watch the ice for signs of movement. No new cracks, no sag, no slow drift. I take a deep breath through my nose and it stings. I do not let that turn into panic. I put my pack closer. I pull out my small headlamp, but I do not turn it on. I do not want light reflecting through the ice. I take out a short piece of cord and tie it to a rock near the opening. I make a simple handhold so I can pull myself out if I get stuck. Then I duck and slide inside. The world changes in one move. The sound of the falls becomes heavier, more constant. The light turns blue and dim through the ice. The air is wet, and my jacket immediately picks up dampness. The rock wall behind the curtain is close, maybe 3 feet at most before it curves. My boots stand on uneven stone covered with thin ice. Water drips somewhere, steady, and it hits rock with a soft tick. I keep my head low. I do not know what is above me. I do not know if the ice roof is thick or thin. I keep one hand on the ice edge, ready to push back out. I move one foot, then the other, testing for slick spots. The pocket does not go deep, but it goes wide. Maybe 8 feet across behind the curtain, with a shallow shelf in back where rock rises. It is not a cave. It is a dent. It is also invisible from the canyon unless someone walks right up to the seam and looks in. I back out after less than a minute. I do it even though I want to stay. I do it because the first mistake people make in bad times is committing too fast. Outside again, the wind feels loud. The canyon feels open. I look up and down, then back at the ice. I decide to build a shelter only if I can build an exit plan at the same time. Day 1 turns into work. I spend the rest of the daylight widening the seam just enough to get through with my pack. I keep the opening narrow on purpose. A wide opening invites a wide collapse, and it also invites someone else's eyes. I want a slit, not a doorway. Every chunk I remove, I carry down the wash and scatter. I step on rock whenever I can. When I must step on snow, I step in wind-blown areas where my prints will soften fast. Before dark, I go behind the ice again and use the shovel to scrape a flat area on the rock. I break thin ice with the hatchet, not hard, keeping the blows controlled. I drag loose stones into a rough border to mark my floor. I do not make it neat. Neat feels good, and also wastes time. I hang the gray tarp as an inner wall, not touching the ice curtain. I anchor it to rock with cord and a couple of nails I have been saving, hammering them into cracks with the hatchet head. The tarp makes a pocket inside the pocket, a place where warm air can collect without going straight to the ice. It also gives me a surface to catch drips. I angle it so water runs down to one corner. I set the foam pad on the higher rock shelf so I am not sleeping on the coldest part of the floor. I lay the sleeping bag out, but I do not crawl in yet. I work until my hands get clumsy. That is my warning sign. Not fear, not thoughts. Clumsy hands end people. When it gets fully dark, I step out and walk a short loop around the falls to see how visible it is at night. The moon is thin. Snow reflects what little light exists. The ice curtain is pale and stands out, but the seam is just a shadow. If I keep light hidden behind the inner tarp, it should not glow through the ice. That is a guess. I need to test it. I go back behind the ice and use my headlamp for 2 seconds, point it at the rock, then shut it off. I step outside and look. I see nothing. That is good. It also means if someone is outside, he might not see my light either. That means I cannot rely on warning. I eat cold food again. I do not light a fire on night 1. I do not trust the space yet. I do not trust myself yet. I curl into the sleeping bag, wearing my jacket, boots loose but not off, because I might need to move fast. The falls hiss all night. Drips tick. The sound makes time hard to measure. On day 2, I start with the most boring problem, because boring problems kill you in winter. Water. I have a bottle that is half full and a second bottle with a cracked cap that leaks. I need more water, but I need it without making a straight line of tracks from my sleeping spot to my source. The falls have ice everywhere, but melting snow costs fuel, and I do not have fuel to waste. I look at the base of the ice mound, where frozen spray builds up. In the morning, the cold is tight, but I can still see faint movement behind the curtain in one spot, a darker stripe. Water is running there. If I can collect drips inside, I can reduce trips outside. I rig the blue tarp inside as a drip catch. I stretch it under the wettest section of rock, using cord and stones to shape a shallow trough. I let it slope into my metal pot. The pot sits in a small pit I scrape so it will not tip. I watch it for 10 minutes. Drips hit the tarp, run down, and a thin trickle starts into the pot. It is slow. It is also free. I taste the first collected water later. It tastes of rock and cold. No chemical smell. I still boil it when I can, but in the moment I need hydration more than perfect safety. Next problem is air. Behind the inner tarp, the air gets still fast. My breath dampens the space. Condensation beads on the tarp. That moisture will freeze and fall as frost later, then melt when warm, then soak my gear. I need a vent, but I cannot cut a hole straight through the ice. That would announce me and also weaken everything. I settle for a low-tech fix. I leave a hand-width gap at the bottom of the inner tarp on one side, and I keep the main seam opening cracked with a wedge of rock so air can exchange without opening wide. Cold air comes in low, warm air leaves high, and it keeps the pocket from turning into a wet bag. By afternoon, I risk a small heat test. I build a tiny stove from a metal coffee can I found weeks ago, punching holes in it with my knife tip. I feed it with pencil-thin sticks collected from dead branches away from the falls. I do not bring a bundle straight here. I carry a few at a time in my jacket, mixing my path so it is not a single line. Inside, behind the inner tarp, I light the stove and set my cup over it. The flame is small. The heat is immediate in a close space. I watch the ice curtain for any sign of sweating or dripping where it should not. I keep the stove far from the ice, closer to the rock back wall. I keep the flame low. I boil a cup of water, and then I put the stove out. The whole test lasts maybe 15 minutes. Outside, I check the ice. No visible change. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke, but the falls and cold pull it away. I do not trust that fully. I still keep fires short. Warm shelter does not mean hot shelter. It means a place where I do not lose heat to wind. By day 3, I stop thinking of it as a hiding spot and start thinking of it as a job site. I wake, collect the drip water, and stash it. I scrape frost off the tarp and wipe it with a rag to keep it from dropping into my bag. I pack my sleeping bag each morning even though it feels pointless. I do it because a tidy space means I can move fast when something goes wrong. I widen the inside shelf so I can sit without rubbing my shoulders on wet rock. I use the shovel edge and hatchet to chip away small protrusions. This is slow. It is loud in a small way. The falls cover most of it, but I keep pausing to listen for anything that does not belong. Footsteps do not carry here well. Sometimes I hear them anyway through vibrations in rock. I pay attention to that. In the afternoon, I see the first infected near the wash. I am outside, a few hundred yards down, collecting dry sticks from a patch of scrub where snow has blown thin. I hear a dragging sound over stone. I stop moving. I let the sticks fall from my hand. I crouch behind a boulder and look. One infected comes down the wash, slow, head tilted, arms loose, clothing torn, skin gray in the cold. It does not sprint. It just drifts, pulled by nothing I can see. It pauses and turns, facing the waterfall. The sound might attract it, or it might be reacting to my movement from earlier. I do not run. Running makes noise, and noise makes problems. I stay still and keep my mouth closed. I shift my weight slowly so my boot does not scrape. The infected stands there for a long time, then moves again, wandering toward the base of the falls. My shelter is behind ice. The seam is small. That helps. It also means if the infected walks right up to the seam, it might sniff around. If it gets curious and starts clawing, it might crack my entrance. It might do worse. I retreat down the wash the way I came, staying behind rock. I give it time. I circle wide and come back from the other side to check the falls from a distance. The infected is at the base near the ice mound. It reaches out and touches the ice with slow fingers. The sound of the falls keeps it occupied. It taps, then drags its hand along the curtain, then loses interest and wanders off downstream. I wait another hour before I go back in. From day 4 through day 7, my life becomes a routine of building and hiding. Morning, collect drip water, wipe condensation, check the seam for new cracks, check the ice above for sag. Then I eat something small and head out, not far to gather. I do not do long scavenging runs yet. I am still weak from the last weeks of moving, and this canyon is new. I keep my radius tight so I can run back if something shows up, even though I hate the idea of running. I find a deadfall area a half-mile away where wind has piled snow deep and covered tracks fast. That becomes my supply spot. I collect sticks there, break them over my knee, and hide them under a boulder ledge. I do not bring wood straight to the falls. I stage it, then carry small amounts on different paths. If someone ever sees footprints, I want them to look random and pointless. Inside, I build a second layer to the inner tarp, making an air gap. 2 thin layers hold warmth better than one. I drape my spare shirt over a cord line to dry it. It freezes more than it dries, but it gets the damp out of my bag. I also build a track plan for water trips. The drip system helps, but it does not give enough. I need more. I do not walk to the base of the falls each time. I chip ice from the inside edge where it is already broken, using the hatchet to pop off small chunks and drop them into my pot to melt later with brief stove burns. That gives me water without leaving a trail. It is slow, but it works. On day 6, snow falls hard for most of the day. That is a gift. It erases tracks and it hides my small movements. I use it to do a wider scouting loop up canyon, staying on rock where possible. I find an abandoned trailhead sign half buried, a parking area that is empty except for one car half covered in snow. The car doors are open. The inside is stripped. People have been here, not recently, but not long ago either. I do not go near the car. I do not need to add my prints to that story. I move past it and check the edge of the parking lot for anything useful that fell out. I find a broken plastic tote lid and a length of rope. I take the rope. The lid I leave. Plastic makes noise, and I already have tarps. Day 8 is my first real scare in the ice pocket. I am inside, crouched near the back wall, melting a pot of ice with the little can stove. The flame is low, and I am watching it the way a person watches a risky bet. I keep one hand near the pot, ready to snuff it. The inner tarp holds the heat in, and I can feel the difference in the air on my face, not comfort, but less biting cold. Then I hear a sound that does not belong. Not footsteps, not voices, a slow grinding and a sharp crack, up above the inner tarp, near the ice curtain. The whole space gives a tiny shiver. My stove flame flickers. I do not freeze. I do not stare. I move. I kill the flame by dropping a flat stone over the can. I grab my pack and shove it through the seam opening first, because if the entrance collapses and my pack is inside, I will not last. Then I shove my sleeping bag out. Then I wriggle out myself, scraping my shoulder on ice. Outside, I back away from the falls and look up. A long crack has opened across the outer curtain, running diagonally. A sheet of ice about the size of a door peels away and slides down, hitting the mound and breaking into chunks. The chunks fan out in a wide spray. None of it hits my seam directly, but the message is clear. The ice is not stable. I stand there breathing slow through my nose, watching for more. After a minute, nothing else falls. The crack stops moving. I do not go back in for an hour. I sit behind a rock, pack in my lap, and I watch. When I finally return, I do it carefully, testing the seam. The inside is intact. The inner tarp is wet with new drips. The ice curtain above has changed. And now I have a new rule. No fire unless I have checked the ice for fresh cracks first. And no fire longer than 10 minutes. By day 10, I start counting my food in my head, and it makes me angry. Angry is useful. It keeps me moving. I cannot live 60 days on what I have. I need a real supply run. That means leaving the canyon and going to where people used to be. That also means crossing open snow and risking a trail that points back here. I wait for weather. I get it on day 11 when the sky turns heavy and the wind shifts. Snow starts again, thick and steady. Tracks will fill. Sound will be muffled. Visibility will be low, which is bad for threats, but good for hiding. I pack light. Knife, hatchet, a small empty sack, rope, my headlamp, and 1 bottle of water. I leave my sleeping bag and pad behind the inner tarp, and I cover them with the blue tarp so any drips will run off. I move out of the canyon on a winding path, stepping on rock when I can, and when I hit open snow, I move fast but controlled. Not running, just steady. I keep my hood up. Snow stings my cheeks and makes my eyelashes stick. I keep blinking and wiping with my glove. The first buildings I find are small, likely Park Service related. A maintenance shed and a restroom block near the trailhead. Both have been hit. Doors forced. Inside, nothing useful left. I find a broken broom handle and a few rusted screws. I take the screws. Screws become tools when you need them. I push farther, toward a small town I saw on a map weeks ago. I do not know what the town is now. I move through trees, not along the road. I keep scanning. I see 2 infected in a field near a fence line, slow and aimless. I skirt wide, crouched, using a drainage ditch for cover. Snow covers my sound. When I finally reach the edge of town, it is quiet in the wrong way. Cars sit abandoned at odd angles. One has a door hanging open. A store sign creaks on its bracket in the wind. I do not go into the center. I pick a strip of buildings on the edge, small and likely overlooked. I hit a hardware store first. The front glass is broken. Inside, the shelves are stripped. Someone has cleaned it out. I find a bin of miscellaneous items that got knocked behind a counter. In it, I find 2 candles, a roll of thin wire, and a packet of hand warmers. I almost laugh. Not because it is funny, but because it is exactly the kind of thing that would have been ignored early and now matters. I take all of it. I also find a small tube of sealant, partly frozen but usable. That might save my tarp seams. I shove it into my jacket. In the back of the store, I hear a noise that makes me stop. A soft scrape, then a thump. Not wind, not metal, something moving. I do not go deeper. I do not call out. I back away slow, keeping my weight on the balls of my feet so the floor does not creak. I leave through a side door that hangs crooked. Outside, snow hides my exit trail fast. I keep moving. I hit a small grocery next. Same story. Stripped shelves, the floor littered with torn packaging. In the back office, I find a half case of canned soup under a desk. It feels almost staged, too perfect. But it is real. The dust is thick. The cans are cold. I take as many as I can carry without making my bag too heavy. Heavy slows me down. On the way out, I see a person. A man in a dark coat stands under an awning across the street, half hidden behind a column. He's holding a long object that could be a rifle or a pipe. I cannot tell. His face is mostly covered. He is watching me, and when my eyes lock on him, he does not wave. He does not shout. He just shifts his stance, turning his shoulders so the object points more toward me. I do not raise my hands. I do not try to talk. Talking becomes negotiation, and negotiation becomes a trap when you are outnumbered or unknown. I slowly set my bag down, unzip it a little, and pull out one can of soup. I hold it up and set it on the snow between us. Then I take 2 steps back. The man does not move toward the can. He steps sideways, staying under cover, still watching. His posture says he is deciding what I'm worth. I decide for him. I grab my bag and back away, then turn and move down an alley between buildings, keeping low, moving fast. I do not look back until I am 3 blocks away. When I do, I see no one following. That does not mean no one saw. It means no one chose to chase in the snow. I leave town on a different route than I entered. I loop wide through a drainage area, stepping in shallow water that cuts through snow, letting it wash my boot soles. It is cold and it makes my feet numb, but it also breaks the clean pattern of my tracks. I climb out on rock and keep moving. I make it back to the falls near dark on day 11, and I do not feel relief. I feel urgency. Because someone in town saw me, and that someone might decide to follow tracks if the storm eases. I do not want my hiding spot connected to a town run. I spend the last light doing damage control. I walk a messy loop around the falls, stamping random tracks in different directions, stepping into old deer lines, breaking branches, making the area look busy in a pointless way. Then I take a branch and sweep the snow in the most direct line from the wash to my seam. It does not erase it perfectly. It turns it into rough churn that looks older. Inside, I stash the food under the shelf and cover it. I do not celebrate. I do not cook a big meal. I eat 1 can cold and drink drip water. The falls keep hissing. I keep listening for anything else. Day 12 brings the first thaw hint. Not warmth, just sun. The sky clears. Light hits the ice curtain, and the surface starts to glitter. Tiny beads form on the outer face and then freeze again when wind hits. The whole curtain creaks in places. It makes the same slow noises old trees make under snow load. Except this is ice and it can fail faster. I change my routine. I start checking the ice every hour. I mark cracks with charcoal from my stove so I can see if they spread. I move my sleeping shelf farther back, away from the curtain. I keep my pack packed most of the time. I keep my stove use minimal. Warm shelter now means safe shelter more than comfortable shelter. On day 13, I hear voices for the first time near the falls. I am inside, crouched behind the inner tarp, fixing a hole with sealant, when the sound shifts. Human voices are not easy to hear over the waterfall, but the rhythm of them is different than wind. Short bursts, then pauses, then another burst. I kill my headlamp even though it is off. I freeze my hands in place and listen. I catch a few words through the noise, not enough to understand. A man's voice, then a woman's voice. Close. Closer than I want. I do not move toward the seam to look. Looking risks light reflection. Looking risks scraping sound. I stay behind the tarp and shift my weight so my knees are on the foam pad and not on rock. Rock transmits sound. The voices move past the falls, down the wash. I hear one laugh, short and sharp. Then it is gone. The whole encounter lasts maybe a minute. When it ends, I stay still for another 10 minutes, counting drips, counting my own mistakes. After that, I make a new plan for leaving the shelter if someone finds the seam. I cannot fight from inside. If someone wedges the entrance and traps me, I die. I need a secondary escape route. From day 14 to day 20, I work on an escape that is not obvious. Behind the ice curtain, the back wall has a narrow crack where rock layers split. It is too small for me to fit through, but it runs upward. I test it with my pry bar. It gives a little, not much. I chip at it when I can, using the hatchet tip, shaving stone. It is slow and it hurts my hands. I do it anyway. The idea is not to create a tunnel through rock. That is impossible. The idea is to create a squeeze route into the side channel where water once ran, maybe leading to a vent to the surface behind the falls. If I can open enough to crawl into a cavity, I might have a way out if the seam is blocked. It is a long shot. It is also something I can do with time. I also build a signal system inside, not for calling help, but for warning myself. I tie a few pieces of thin wire to small stones near the seam, creating a crude rattle. If someone touches the entrance, stones will clink. The falls will drown some of it. But inside the pocket, I might hear it. I test it by tapping the wire. I hear a faint clink behind the tarp. It is not perfect. It is better than nothing. Food helps my strength, but it also creates temptation. I want to cook longer. I want warmth that lasts. I do not allow it. I keep eating cold or barely warmed. I keep my stove burns short. I keep the inner tarp gap open for ventilation. On day 18, the first real thaw cycle hits. The temperature rises enough that water starts running more behind the ice, and the sound of the falls changes. It is louder, wetter. Inside, drips increase. My drip tarp fills the pot faster, which is good, but the floor turns slick. I scatter small stones to give my boots grip. I move slow. I keep my gear off the floor. That night, something shifts in the ice again. A heavy groan, then a deep crack. I am already packed. I slide out and watch from a distance. A section of the curtain near the center slumps, not fully falling, but changing shape. It makes the seam area more exposed for a moment, and my stomach drops at the thought of someone seeing the dark line. In the morning, the slumped section refreezes in a new position. It hides my seam better again. The ice is doing random favors now. I do not trust it. By day 21, I have lived here long enough that I start thinking in systems instead of moments. Heat, minimal, controlled, always monitored. Water, drip collection plus occasional ice melt. Food, rationed, with the next run planned before I run out. Tracks, broken up, swept, hidden by weather when possible. Noise, no unnecessary movement, no metal clanks, no long chopping sessions. The infected drift through the canyon every few days, sometimes one, sometimes two. Once I see four together, spread out, moving in the same general direction. I stay inside those days. I do not peek. I do not risk the seam. The falls draw them sometimes, but the ice and rock keep them from seeing much. They tap the ice occasionally. They wander off. The bigger threat becomes people. On day 23, I find fresh boot prints near my staging spot in the deadfall area. Not old, not drifted. The edges are sharp. Someone walked there within the last day. The prints circle and then leave. They do not lead straight toward my falls. That is good. It is also a warning that I am not alone in the region. I do not go back to my shelter directly. I take a wide loop, wasting daylight, but protecting my location. I walk on rock, step in shallow water where I can, and I keep turning to look behind me. I see nothing. The feeling of being watched does not show up in my chest. It shows up in my choices. I keep making smaller choices, tighter ones. Inside, I move my staged wood closer so I do not have to travel as far. I also stop storing food in one place. I split it, some under the shelf, some in a crack in the rock I found behind the inner tarp, some in my pack. If someone finds the pocket and takes something, I want to still have something left. Day 26 brings the closest human contact so far. It is afternoon. The light is sharp. The air is cold but not brutal. I am outside, sweeping tracks near the seam with a branch, when I hear the crunch of snow nearby. Not drift, not ice, a footstep. I step back behind a rock outcrop and hold still, branch in my hand. I keep my knife sheathed. Knife out invites bad decisions. A woman comes into view from up canyon. She is bundled heavy, carrying a pack and a long stick. Not a rifle, a walking staff or maybe a spear. Her gait is tired. She stops near the base of the falls and looks up at the ice curtain. She scans the area the way a person scans for shelter. She walks closer, and my hands tighten around the branch. If she walks to the seam, this becomes a problem that might not be solved quietly. She does not go to the seam. She goes to the center of the curtain and taps the ice with her staff, testing. She leans in, looking for a gap. She cannot see mine from where she stands. She moves left, then right, then steps back and shakes her head. I cannot hear her words, but I see her mouth move. She looks frustrated. She turns and walks away down the wash, not fast, not sneaking, just moving on. I stay behind rock until she is gone. Then I go back behind the ice and sit in the dark, holding my own knees for a minute, thinking about how close I came to being discovered without any dramatic moment. From day 27 to day 35, the weather turns harsher. Windstorms roll through, pushing snow in sheets. The canyon funnels the wind, and it finds every gap. Behind the ice, the damp air freezes on surfaces and builds a crust on the tarp edges. I keep scraping it. I keep wiping my sleeping bag. I keep my boots inside the inner tarp at night so they do not freeze stiff. One morning, the seam is partly blocked by wind-blown snow packed into the gap. That scares me more than an infected. Snow does not mean intent, but it means suffocation if it seals the entrance, and I burn a stove inside. I clear it carefully, using the shovel, pushing the snow out and down the wash. Then I wedge the seam slightly open with a stone again. I accept that this risks visibility. I prefer visibility to sealed air. I also start keeping a candle ready. Candles are not heat for comfort. Candles are heat for survival if my lighter fails or if I need a tiny light to work without a headlamp. I test one candle inside the tarp pocket for a minute, and then I blow it out. I step outside and look at the ice curtain. No glow. Good. On day 31, I find evidence that someone has been near my falls again. A new set of tracks crosses the wash about 50 yards downstream. The tracks stop, then turn, as if the person stood and listened. Then the tracks leave. I follow them with my eyes, not with my feet. They go toward the tree line and vanish. I decide that this canyon is becoming a route, not a dead end. That means I need to be ready to leave before spring thaw makes the falls more active and draws more attention. Day 36 is the day the ice teaches me what collapse actually means. It starts with a sound deep in the curtain, a dull boom that I feel through rock more than hear. The falls hiss louder for a moment, then the whole curtain shivers. I am inside, sitting on the shelf, eating cold soup, when frost shakes loose from the rock above and dusts my shoulders. I do not wait for the second warning. I shove my pack out the seam. I shove my sleeping bag out. I crawl out after it. Outside, I back away and look up. A huge section of the curtain on the left side breaks free. Not a small sheet. A thick slab several feet wide. It drops and hits the ice mound, and the mound cracks and shifts, sending broken pieces sliding down into the wash. The slab does not hit my seam directly, but the impact sends a ripple through the entire formation. For a moment, I think the whole curtain will come down. It does not. It settles, creaking and groaning, then goes still. My entrance is now more exposed because the left side is thinner. Also, the base mound is lower, making it easier for someone to climb up and inspect. My perfect hiding spot has become a questionable one. I wait an hour. I watch for more movement. Then I go inside and assess damage. The inner tarp is fine. The drip system still works. The floor has more debris. The air smells fresher because the curtain has opened a bit and airflow increased. That is good for air, bad for hiding. That night, I do not sleep much. Not because my body screams at me, because my brain keeps running routes. Where do I go if I lose this spot tomorrow? By day 38, I decide that surviving 60 days does not mean staying here for 60 days. It means using this shelter as a bridge until I can move to a more stable option. The frozen waterfall is protection, but it is also a timer. Spring will arrive, thaw will accelerate, ice will break, water will run stronger. That will attract infected and people because sound and water draw both. So I start preparing a cache. I pick a spot up canyon where rock forms a narrow slot. I wedge a flat stone into a crack and create a hidden pocket behind it. I stash 3 cans of soup there, a candle, and half my wire. If I have to run with only my pack, I want to fall back. I also start scouting for a second shelter. I cannot wander far, but I can look. I find a small overhang a mile away that could work in a pinch. Not warm, but wind protected. I find a hollow log large enough to hide gear in. I mark these spots in my head with simple anchors: the bent pine, the split boulder, the creek bend. I do not draw a map. A map can be stolen. On day 40, I make another town run, shorter and more cautious. This time, no storm covers me. That makes it riskier. It also means I can see threats earlier. I move at dawn, when light is enough to navigate, but most movement is low. I stay off roads, cut through yards, keep to shadowed sides of buildings. I hit the same grocery and find it empty now. The office stash is gone. Someone found it after me or before me and came back. That tells me the town is being worked by others. I do not linger. I find a small sporting goods shop, and inside, behind a fallen shelf, I find a compact sleeping pad and a pair of wool socks. I take both. The socks matter more than gold now. I also find a small bag of trail mix that is spilled. I scoop what I can into my pocket, ignoring grit. On my way out of town, I see the same man under an awning again. Or maybe a different man dressed similarly. He is farther away this time, but I see the posture. I see the way he keeps cover between him and the street. I do not offer a trade this time. I turn down a side street and leave without making it a conversation. I do not go straight back to the falls. I loop through a shallow creek and walk in it for a quarter mile. Water soaking my boots, cold biting, but it scrubs tracks. Then I climb out and cut across rock and brush until I reach the canyon. I get back to my shelter after dark, tired and careful. Days 41 through 48 are a grind, but a controlled one. I keep improving insulation. I hang spare clothing on the inner tarp to create another layer. I use the sealant to close small holes in the tarp and stop drafts. I build a better drip catch with the wire, shaping the tarp into a smoother trough. I collect more water with less spill. I boil when I can. Short burns, always watched. I also keep working on the back wall crack. On day 46, I manage to open it enough to push my forearm in. I feel cold air moving upward. That means a cavity exists, maybe a narrow chimney. It is not a full escape yet, but it might become one if the seam is blocked. I widen it another inch over the next days, hands raw and stiff from stonework. The thaw cycles get more frequent. Daytime sun creates more drips. Night refreezes them into sharper ice. The curtain creaks more often. I start sleeping with my boots on again. It is not comfortable. It is practical. On day 48, I hear gunshots in the distance. Not close, maybe from the direction of town. 2 shots, then a pause, then one more. The sound echoes through the canyon. Birds lift from trees. The infected respond sometimes when shots happen. I watch the wash for movement that day. I see none. I still keep my stove cold. Smoke is a flag when people are hunting each other. Day 49 brings a visitor I cannot ignore. I am outside near the falls, collecting scattered ice chunks to melt, when I see a figure down the wash. A man, closer than I want, walking straight toward the falls. He is not wandering, he is not infected. His posture is alert. He is carrying a pack and holding something long in his right hand. This time, it is clearly a rifle. I step behind rock and crouch low, my breath held because any movement feels loud. The waterfall noise gives me cover, but it also means he can walk close without hearing me. He stops at the base of the ice mound and looks up. He scans left and right. He looks at the seam area for a long time. My wire rattle does not move. He has not touched the entrance. He is just studying. He climbs partway up the ice mound, careful, using the rifle as a balance point. He is close enough now that if he looks into the seam, he might see darkness. He might see the edge of my inner tarp if he has a light. If he decides to probe, my hiding spot ends. I make a decision that feels wrong, but might be right. I create a distraction away from the seam. I pick up a rock and toss it down the wash to my left, aiming for a frozen patch so it will clatter. The rock hits and skitters, making sharp noise. It is small. It is enough. The man freezes and swings his head toward the sound. He shifts his weight and almost slips on the ice mound. He catches himself, then climbs down fast, moving away from the falls and toward where the rock landed. He is cautious, rifle ready, but he is moving. I use that moment to slide behind the ice seam, pack already inside, and pull my inner tarp tighter, blocking any stray light. I crouch and hold still. I do not touch the stove. I do not adjust gear. I become part of the rock and tarp. Minutes pass. I hear faint crunching outside, then silence, then crunching again. The man circles, searching. He does not come back to the seam. After maybe 20 minutes, I hear him move down the wash and away. I wait another hour before I move at all. When I finally peek through a pinhole gap in the tarp, I see only the pale ice glow. No shadows, no motion. After day 49, I accept something I have been avoiding. The frozen waterfall shelter is no longer secret enough to bet my life on. People are scouting it. It makes sense. It is a landmark. It is water. It is cover. Anyone with half a brain will consider it. So my goal shifts. I stop investing in comfort. I invest in leaving clean. I pack my gear each morning and only unpack what I need. I stop storing wood in a visible stash and start carrying smaller amounts, burning less. I move my remaining food into my pack except for a few cans hidden in the rock cache up canyon. I clean any obvious signs inside, stuffing scrap bits and trash into a bag I plan to bury in snow away from the falls. On day 52, I get my back wall crack open enough to push my head into a narrow cavity. It is tight. The rock scrapes my shoulders, the air is colder, and I smell earth and old wet stone. I push my headlamp in, shielded under my jacket so the light does not leak through the ice. The cavity runs upward at an angle and then turns. I cannot see where it ends. It is not a clean escape, but it is a route. If someone blocks the seam, I can climb into this crack and maybe find a vent to the surface or at least avoid being trapped in the main pocket. That night, I sleep with my boots on, pack under my arm, and my hand on the pry bar. Not to fight, to clear rock if I need to. Days 53 to 58 blur into constant small tasks. The weather swings. Warm sun at noon, then sharp cold at night. Drips become streams for an hour, then freeze again. The ice curtain sheds smaller chunks more often. The base mound grows unstable, cracking under its own weight. I stop walking near it at all. I use my seam entry only, moving carefully, because a slip and fall on that ice would be loud and final. I do a last short town run on day 55 and find almost nothing. More signs of people, more stripped shelves, more broken glass. I see smoke rising from somewhere on the far side of town. That means someone is settled, at least temporarily. I do not go toward it. Settlements attract attention. Attention attracts fighting. Back at the falls, I start leaving at dawn and returning at dusk. Not because it is safer, but because it is harder for someone to track my timing. I also change my paths each time. I step in water when I can. I cross rock ridges. I backtrack in my own prints sometimes, then step off onto stone, letting the trail confuse. The infected increase in number near the canyon on day 57. I see 6 over the course of a day, spread out, drifting. The louder water might be drawing them, or something else is happening in the area, pushing them outward. I stay inside most of that day, silent, no stove, no light. Day 59 is the day I decide to leave for good. It is midday. Sun hits the ice curtain, and I hear a long crack run through it. A spiderweb spreads from the center outward. The curtain is still holding, but the pattern is wrong. It is not a single slab breaking off. It is the whole structure shifting. I step out and watch from the tree line. I see water moving behind thinner sections, dark and fast. The falls are waking up. The frozen curtain is becoming a temporary shell, not a wall. I cannot be behind it when it fails. So I pack everything. Not neatly, not perfectly. I pack fast and smart. Food, water bottles, socks, pad, sleeping bag, tarp folded tight, rope, knife, hatchet, pry bar, candle, wire, lighter. I leave behind only what I cannot carry, and I bury those scraps under snow down the wash, away from the falls, so the site looks less lived in. Before I go, I stand behind the ice one last time and look at the little space that held my life together. The inner tarp is stained with drips. The rock shelf is scuffed from my boots. My drip catch hangs limp. It is not home. It is a solution that worked until it did not. I step out, sweep the seam entrance area one last time with a branch, and I wedge a loose chunk of ice into the seam so it looks sealed. Not strong enough to stop someone who wants in, but enough to hide the dark line. Day 60 starts before sunrise. I move up canyon first, not down toward town. I hit my cache and take the hidden cans and candle. I take a moment to drink and eat without stopping too long. Then I keep moving, following the rocky ribs that climb out of the canyon into higher ground. The cold is still there, but the air is different. It smells less sharp. The wind carries a dampness that means the season is shifting. Snow is still deep in shaded areas, but on exposed rock I see wet streaks from melt. My boots pick up mud in places. Mud does not show prints the same way. It also sticks and slows. I keep my eyes moving. I see an infected in the distance, hunched near a boulder, arms hanging. It does not notice me. I keep it that way by staying downwind and keeping my pace steady. I pass above it on a ridge where stone keeps my steps quiet. By midday, I find the overhang I scouted earlier. It is not much, but it is stable rock, not ice. Wind is blocked from one side. The ground beneath is dry gravel, not slick. I set my pack down and let my shoulders drop for a moment. Not relief, just a pause. I start working immediately, because stopping turns into weakness. I string the tarp to block wind. I set the pad. I unroll the bag. I check the area for tracks. Nothing fresh. I build a small fire outside the tarp line, using a shallow pit, and I keep it low. Smoke rises thin in the cool air and disappears fast. I boil water. I eat warm soup for the first time in days, and it tastes plain and real. Near dusk, I hear the Waterfall canyon in the distance. The sound carries faintly on the wind. Then I hear a different sound, a heavy rumble that rolls through the hills. It could be ice collapse, it could be rock. I do not know. I do not go back to check. I do not need to confirm what I already understand. I sit under the overhang with my pack close and my tools lined up where I can reach them. The sky turns purple, then black. The air cools again. Somewhere down in the valley, something calls out. Not human, not clear. I do not answer. I keep my light off. I let the dark do its job. 60 days is not a trophy. It is proof that the plan worked long enough. The frozen waterfall shelter got me through the worst of winter and bought me time to think, to gather, to recover strength. It also taught me that any shelter with a timer becomes a trap if you pretend it is permanent. I close my eyes and listen to the wind and the small crackle of coals outside. I do not picture the world fixed. I picture tomorrow's tasks. Water, tracks, food, stability. Leave no easy story behind for anyone to read.